Hello and welcome back to Hydroponics Daily with me, Dr. Russell Sharp, the inventor of Gold Leaf Fertilizer, or as it's called in the UK, liquid gold. Now, Gold Leaf is not an organic fertilizer. That means that it doesn't comply with the organic regulations. It doesn't mean it's not a great fertilizer. It doesn't mean that it's not good for soil biology. It just means that it doesn't conform to the specific organic regulations laid down by certain organic regulatory bodies like OMRI in the US and North America, Canada, and the EU in Europe. So it's still biorational. It still feeds beneficial bacteria. It doesn't do any harm like a lot of hydroponic fertilizers can do, especially the ones that are really acidic or really alkaline. So I thought I'd talk about fertilizers that people who insist on being organic could use, and where, if you're buying an organic fertilizer, where the raw materials come from. So strictly speaking, hydroponics cannot be organic because hydroponics involves soilless cultivation. There's no soil involved. And to be organic, you have to be growing in soil, and it has to be in the ground. So you can't be growing in containers, and you can't be growing without soil. So that makes two reasons why hydroponics can't be used. Now, there is a movement to try and get organic hydroponics a subsection to be known as organic hydroponics. However, I don't believe that's successful yet, and I doubt it would be successful in Europe the way things work with the European Union. But let's think about the sort of fertilizers that can be used that are classed as organic fertilizers, and still you can still use organic fertilizers in hydroponics. And these are a lot. Certainly, many of them are good for the environment and are sustainably sourced. Some of them are not, though, and we'll talk about them. So the main one that's used to deliver NPK is fish emulsion. So that's liquid derived from fermentation or enzymatic digestion of fish waste. So the guts, the fish heads, the skeletons, it's digested. Now, I've said they're fermented or enzymatically digested. However, you are allowed to use phosphoric acid or acids in many countries. And phosphoric acid is a nasty chemical. And it's not an organic chemical, it's a synthetic chemical. But it is allowed to be used and that's one of the big issues in organic farming or in organic fertilizers. It's a get out of jail free card, really, for a lot of fertilizer manufacturers. So some fish emulsions, they can be very high in phosphorus. And you think, oh yeah, it's because the fish is, high in phosphorus. And it's not. It's just that they've contained so much phosphoric acid to digest them that's where the P comes from. And so be wary of that. They should be high in nitrogen because you think about all that fish meat and the skeleton, that will have high nitrogen levels. So there'll be a natural level of nitrogen. People's claimed that also seaweed extract is high in nitrogen, but it's not. You will get a lot of you get a lot of potassium in seaweed extracts. Again, that's not from the actual seaweed. It's from the potassium hydroxide that's used to make the cheap and cheerful seaweed extracts. They're very high they use very caustic potassium hydroxide and high temperatures and high pressure to extract it. Seaweed extract is more of a biostimulant rather than a fertilizer. However, because it's extracted with that potassium hydroxide, you will see a lot of products that contain seaweed extracts because of that, because it gives you the K. So the fish will give you the N. It'll also give you the P from the phosphoric acid. Seaweed will give you the K again, but not from the seaweed itself. So you can see these workarounds slowly build up in organic farming. Alfalfa meal extract, we think of legumes and soya as being high in nitrogen, and they will be high in nitrogen, so that's a natural source of nitrogen. They'll also contain things like tricontinol, but only small amounts. So soybean hydrolysate, soybean protein that's been broken down into amino acids, that'll be a good source of nitrogen. Feather meal extract, so just like the fish waste, feather waste is a big issue. So they're high in slow release nitrogens that might need breaking down to form a liquid fertilizer. And blood meal extract, high in nitrogen again, used as a fertilizer and a biostimulant, an amino acid biostimulant. However, blood meal extract, feather meal extract, fish emulsion, these are all animal waste byproducts of meat production. So a lot of people who are organic might also be vegetarian or vegan. And I don't know because I'm not vegetarian or vegan, but would you have issues using fish emulsion, feather meal, blood meal? And you might say, no, because these are byproducts, these are waste. I'm not eating them, I'm not consuming them directly. Or you might think, well, actually, by using them, I am increasing the profitability of the meat supply chain because I am providing profit for the waste product, therefore increasing the profitability of the whole industry. So, and therefore promoting it and increasing its growth and things like that. So if you're organic and you're also a vegetarian or a vegan, you might struggle to get fertilizers that fit within your moral compass and things like that. So that's something to consider. Other things for phosphorus, rock phosphate is allowed. So quarried rock phosphate. Rock phosphate is the starting material for a lot of phosphate production. So in Morocco, Russia, places like that, in Canada, South America, you get rock phosphate and then you add other acids and things like that to make triple superphosphate, and then like things like ammonium phosphate that's ammonia mixed with phosphoric acid, I think. So yeah, you get less organic, but rock phosphate, the stuff that's just ground up and made into small particles, maybe put into a suspension or an emulsion, that is organic. That's allowed in organic farming. You do also see something called rock dust being sold. Certainly in the UK, there's a few companies selling rock dust. However, these are just ground up. I think it's granite. And I don't like these products because they say they contain contains 80 essential elements. Well, plants only need 14 elements at most. So, and also there aren't that many stable elements. So which of these elements are radioactive in your rock dust, your organic rock dust product? And the other reason I don't like them is that when you've made soil, you're trying to add air, you're trying to add water, you're trying to add biology, you're trying to add organic matter. And if you add rock dust, you're just going backwards, So I'm not a big fan of rock dust. Rock phosphate, if it was an organic farmer, I might consider using. And then for K, the big macronutrients, wood ash is a good source of potassium, and certain plants are very high in potassium. Certainly, a lot of marine plants. Banana peel, again, seaweed extract because of that potassium hydroxide, and molasses. Molasses is a good source of potassium. However, you just need to be careful with the osmotic stress of molasses. Don't overdo it. And certainly a product that a lot of people use during finishing and as a lot of sort of like resin producer. When it comes to the secondary macronutrients, dolomitic lime is a really good source of calcium and magnesium. And then gypsum is a good source of calcium and sulfur. Again, these are both quarried products. You can have like a lot of seafood waste, like crustacean meal, that can be high in calcium and chitin. However, very, very slow release. I've got crab shells and clam shells in crab skeletons and clam shells in my garden that I've put in my compost heap probably about 10 years ago, and they're still there and they don't look like they've broken down anything. They don't biodegrade very fast. So be very wary when people say things like, eggshells are a good source of calcium. Epsom salts, magnesium sulfate, that's a really good source. It's technically a mineral, but it's allowed in some organic standards, so just check that. Okay, so they're really, a lot of them, apart from crustacean waste, they're all mined products, and crustacean waste would be the one that you might have issue with if you're a vegetarian or you're a vegan. And then micronutrients, that's where an issue can come in. Again, seaweed extracts are probably a good source of micronutrients, especially things like boron and vitamin B12. Vermicompost tea extracts, compost teas, and humic and fulvic acids. Extracted from leonardite or compost or peat, just check your local regulations if you're using them, whether they're allowed. And then what are the sources? There's a lot of sort of carbon and microbial food source products, so things like molasses, glucose syrups, compost extracts. They won't be providing nutrients themselves, but if they stimulate beneficial microbes, things like mycorrhiza, trichoderma, bacillus, then they could help with extracting nutrients from what's already there in the soil. And that's a big thing in organics, is getting out what's already there, not actually continually adding loads more nutrients and building it up that way. And you'll find a lot of organic ranges in the hydroponic area also have aloe vera extracts in their lineup, willow bark extracts, and potentially neem products or neem cake extracts. However, neem is a product that's only allowed in certain jurisdictions, and some countries neem extract's allowed and it can be used wherever, whenever, and then others it's not allowed, and others it's regulated and registered. So just check on that. So as I say, organic hydroponics, strictly speaking, is not allowed, but there are a lot of organic products in hydroponics because people want to use organic products in hydroponics. So they sort of break down into the extracts from animals, from plants or algae, those that are quarried, and microbials, sugar-based products, and things like this. So together you can produce a good mix of NPK, micronutrients, secondary nutrients, and good biology. Getting that all into a liquid is difficult, so you might have to use a few powdered products rather than relying on liquids like you would with standard hydroponics. It can get a bit funky if you're adding them to a fertigation tank because the microbes will start brewing. You might start to get filamentous microbes. You might start to get precipitation. You could get blockages. These are all things you have to deal with if you're a hydroponic grower. You probably want to grow in something like cocoa because that's more forgiving when you get things like these bacterial growths. You don't want to use rock wool because it's not a sustainable material, whereas cocoa is more sustainable because it's from a waste product, a plant waste product. It's not without its issues because you're importing it from, say, Sri Lanka or Indonesia. It's certainly better than peat because you're not digging up a biodiversity hotspot to extract it. You're not releasing carbon dioxide in massive amounts. I mean, you're not removing it from a carbon sink. So cocoa is what I would use if I was an organic grower. And I would use these organic products. I would use them with smaller amounts. I would go slowly. I wouldn't rush into things. I would make sure my grows were small to begin with until I'd optimized it and got a good system where the nutrients release slowly and a sort of a sustainable process. The good news is if you're not using any growth regulators, you could look at recycling your grow media between grows. And so you could do a big grow, you could compost the grow media, and then when that's composted, you could then use it again for your third grow and sort of cycle it like that. Or you could wait and just do it grow after grow, continual system. That's the way I would do it if I was an organic grower. I wouldn't use fresh grow media every time. It would be against the organic principles of sustainability and things like this. So if you're an organic grower, you do anything differently. A lot of people will say they don't use fertilizer at all. They just dig soil up from the ground and put them in. And for some plants, that's really good and you'll get a good crop. And you might even get an even better product because the plants had to really work for it. But a lot of people will want to supercharge their yield. And so adding some fertilizer will be good to that. So yeah, obviously it's hydroponics. You're not going to be digging soil up out of the ground. You're going to be, strictly speaking, you're going to be using an inert media, so probably cocoa. Obviously, traditional organic farmers would be using a lot of manure, a lot of excrement in their fertilization system and from livestock. Again, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you might think that's fine because you're not killing animals to do that. However, you also, as I say, you are increasing the profitability of the meat supply chain by doing that. That's something to consider. But when it comes to organic fertilizers, you're not going to get many products that are made out of excrement, out of manure, because the preservation of the product, getting it on a shelf, the risk to the producer of selling you a product based on excrement would be very high. I once dabbled at creating a product made out of pig's blood because one of my customers said, "Oh, if you make a product out of pig's blood, then the Albanian hydroponic growers will love it." So exporting it over to Albania, I tried that, but the coagulation of the blood, we got it fresh from the abattoir. And it came straight out of the pig because I saw it come straight out of the pig. Tried preserving it, tried preventing coagulation, looked at a lot of techniques for preventing coagulation, but this blood just would not stay liquid. It went solid almost instantaneously in most cases. We do actually have a product now, an iron product in Utrema that looks just like blood. It's a dark red and it's thick and sloppy, but it's completely inorganic. It's not an organic product. It's a synthetic product. It just happens to look like blood and delivers a lot of iron to the product. So if you want a product that looks like blood and delivers iron, just like blood does, really. Hemoglobin is full of iron. Then speak to us about our ultimate iron product. Okay, thank you. Until tomorrow, thanks very much for listening to this rather macabre episode of Hydroponics Daily. And always share and follow if you thought it was of any interest whatsoever. Thank you. Goodbye.